A golden statue of Caligula, cracking, with blood flowing from the stone. Crowds roaring in a dark Colosseum. Crimson sand glowing under torchlight. A young emperor, in gold and crimson robes, laughing manically. Roman soldiers throwing spears into raging ocean waves. Dramatic lighting. Epic trailer style. A dark, scandalous mood. The rise of Caligula. From adored child in tiny boots, to the emperor who would terrify Rome. In the dark pages of the chronicles of human cruelty, few names ignite dread like his. His rule became a chilling reminder of what happens when unchecked power collides with a fractured mind. But before the whispers of orgies, massacres, and blasphemies, there was simply a boy, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Soldiers doted on him, nicknamed him Caligula, meaning little boots. He was the cherished son of Germanicus, the celebrated Roman general, and Agrippina the Elder, proud heiress of the Julio-Claudian line. From the beginning, Caligula was steeped in the ruthless theater of Roman politics, where betrayal was routine and survival often demanded blood. His childhood was laced with trauma. Though the legions adored him, proximity to power placed his family under constant suspicion. His father's death, rumored to be by poison, left scars. His mother and brothers were later exiled, imprisoned, or executed under the paranoid eyes of Emperor Tiberius. Caligula alone remained, surviving not from cleverness or strength, but because he appeared harmless, flamboyant, theatrically unthreatening. Tiberius himself supposedly branded him a viper raised for the Roman people. In 37 AD, Tiberius died, some whispered smothered at Caligula's own hand, and the Senate proclaimed Caligula emperor. At just 24 years old, he inherited an empire stretching from Britain's shores to the deserts of Egypt. The Roman people, weary of Tiberius's grim isolation, embraced the energetic young prince with near-religious devotion. The opening months of his reign shimmered with promise. He repealed many of Tiberius's harsh edicts, freed political prisoners, showered the Praetorian Guard and civil services with gold, even revealed the imperial budget, a shocking gesture of transparency for imperial Rome. To win hearts, he unleashed a storm of entertainment, grand chariot races, brutal gladiator contests, flamboyant theatrical performances. Rome roared back to life. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a golden age reborn. The arenas overflowed with blood and cheers, while Caligula himself watched with an almost childlike delight. Foreign envoys marveled at his intelligence. The Senate exalted his generosity. But behind the glitter, something unsettled those who looked closer. He laughed too long at executions. His eyes lingered on blood pooling in the sand. Servants whispered of him wandering the empty amphitheater at night, silently retracing the steps of the condemned. Darkness was already blooming beneath the charm, waiting for the spark. It seemed a dazzling beginning, an emperor for the people, radiant with promise. Rome had suffered years of misery under Tiberius, a joyless recluse, and now the city erupted with hope. Caligula, only 24, bursting with charm, swept into power with laughter on his lips and generosity in his hands. He bribed loyalty with massive payouts, released prisoners, lifted exiles, restored disgraced senators. Most shockingly, he published the empire's accounts, exposing what no ruler had dared before. The people adored him. Crowds hailed him as savior, heir of the heroic Germanicus. Women hurled flowers. Men wept openly. Hardened senators, long crushed by Tiberius's suspicion, greeted him with reverence. But it wasn't just mercy that captured them, it was spectacle. Caligula, the born performer, transformed Rome into his stage. Gladiator games thundered nearly every week. Chariot races dazzled with pageantry of speed and blood. Theaters reopened. Musicians filled the streets. Exotic beasts, lions, elephants, bears, paraded before roaring crowds, then fell in savage combat. The empire's coffers drained into this carnival of delight. Music, laughter, the clash of steel echoed through Rome. At its center sat Caligula, blazing in gold and crimson, applauding with feverish joy. Yet those who stood closest felt a chill. His laughter was too sharp, too drawn out. He smiled with eerie fascination as gladiators bled, his gaze tracing every crimson trail soaking the sand. And when the crowds fell silent, he continued laughing long after. Still, the Senate praised him. Foreign envoys admired his eloquence. And Caligula pressed on, resuming projects abandoned by Tiberius, an emperor who seemed, at least for now, unstoppable. Caligula's early works seemed noble, restoring temples, aqueducts, theaters. Employment surged as abandoned projects roared back to life. Rome buzzed with new energy. Yet behind the celebration, whispers crept through the palace. Servants spoke of strange habits, Caligula pacing the empty arena at night, muttering to himself, refusing to sleep unless guards stood at every corner. Some swore they saw him seated in silence, staring at dried bloodstains on the sand. He was no longer eccentric. He was changing. What no one realized was that this golden dawn was not the start of an era, but the last warmth before the plunge. The mask of mercy was cracking, and something darker stirred beneath. Then came the illness. 8 months into his reign, while Rome basked in games and generosity, Caligula collapsed. Records disagree. Epilepsy, meningitis, poisoning, but the effect was the same. Rome nearly lost its emperor. Citizens prayed in temples. Senators sacrificed. Hardened soldiers wept. 4 days, he drifted between fevered rants and near-death silence. Spare him, the people begged the gods. And the gods, it seemed, listened. He survived. But the man who rose from that sickbed was not the man who had fallen. His voice, once charming, grew harsh and grating. His smile no longer reached his eyes. His gaze lingered too long, cold, unsettling. At first, courtiers excused it, surely recovery pains. But it only worsened. He screamed at servants for trivial mistakes, accused senators of whispering, beat them publicly, spoke to statues as if they answered. At night, guttural laughter echoed through palace halls. Guards whispered that their emperor was no longer sane. Caligula stopped tolerating hesitation. One senator who bowed too slowly, executed. His family exiled. His property seized. Mourning periods became deadly decrees. To laugh, to bathe, or to dine during them was treason. A senator smiled at dinner. He was stabbed before dessert. Even dreams became fatal. When Caligula claimed a respected senator threatened him in a dream, the man was executed immediately. Rome had once prayed for his life. Now it prayed for his death. Historians later speculated his illness damaged his brain. Whether sickness, trauma, or the intoxication of power, the transformation was undeniable. The Golden Emperor was gone. In his place stood a tyrant, volatile, cruel, unchained. What began as odd behavior hardened into ritualized tyranny. Caligula demanded not obedience, but submission. Senators crawled on their knees before him, kissed his feet, called him a living god. Hesitation meant execution, exile, or ruin. At banquets he laughed, drank, told stories, then suddenly accused a guest of insult, having them dragged away to die. He decreed it treason to smile during the mourning of his sister Drusilla. Rome became a city of whispers. He turned cruelty into theater. Nobles humiliated. Estates seized. Poets mutilated for mockery. Caligula claimed to speak with the gods, placing golden statues of himself in sacred temples. Priests conducted rites in his name. Even the calendar was remade to honor him. His thumb became divine judgment, life or death at a gesture. He boasted, "I can kill anyone, just because it pleases me." Rome was no longer ruled. It was held hostage. Then divinity and depravity fused. Caligula no longer saw himself as man. He declared himself Jupiter reborn, Apollo made flesh, Neptune walking among mortals. Temples rededicated in his name. Statues raised beside Mars and Jupiter. Ambassadors knelt not before the emperor, but before his image. Worship became a loyalty test. Citizens bowed in temples out of fear, not faith. Terrified spies were listening. But worship in temples was not enough. He demanded it in dining halls and bedrooms. Festivals remade in his honor. He claimed he had once defeated a thunderstorm by shouting louder and renamed months for himself. Then came his most grotesque invention, sacred communions of degradation. Nobles forced to kneel naked before his statue. Women to call him divine husband. Men to hail him father of gods. During banquets, he stopped entertainment until prayers were sufficient. One night he cursed Jupiter from the Capitol, and when lightning never struck, he declared it proof he had surpassed the gods. Even priests whispered, their emperor was unhinged. The palace became a theater of perversion. Caligula hosted orgies in public halls. Husbands watched their wives stripped and offered to him. Senators, generals, nobles, all reduced to props in his rituals. He flaunted incest with his beloved sister Drusilla, treating her as his wife, then deified her after her sudden death. Ancient historians claim he also violated his sisters, Agrippina the Younger and Julia Livilla, fondling them at feasts, parading them as divine figures, offering them to foreign envoys. Resistance was impossible. These acts were not just perverse, they were ritualized. He called them sacred rites demanded by the gods. The palace was no longer a seat of rule, but a labyrinth of terror. Caligula's moods were legendary. He could enter a feast smiling and moments later, order someone executed for coughing. He devised punishments not just to kill, but to humiliate. A senator was covered in honey and tied to a stake, insects released as Caligula sipped wine. Another noble was sewn into a donkey's skin and left to rot. Kitchens served mock dishes of human flesh, labeled as traitors' meat. Guests sat frozen, afraid even to vomit. Rome's economy bled as his cruelty deepened. Tiberius had left a fortune of 2.7 billion sesterces. Caligula burned through it within a year. When the treasury emptied, he seized inheritances, sold offices, and even turned the palace into a brothel, noble women forced to serve. He taxed everything: marriages, divorces, markets, windows, doors, silence itself. Merchants fled. Farmers buried coins. The middle class collapsed. Yet he demanded more: impossible monuments. A floating bridge across the Bay of Naples, just to ride his horse across water. Rome starved, while he built temples to himself. Then came war against the sea. Furious at storms delaying him, he declared Neptune his enemy. He marched legions to the coast of Gaul, ordered them to hurl spears at the waves, and collect seashells as spoils of war. Soldiers crawled along beaches filling baskets as officers counted them. He returned to Rome in triumph, parading shells as trophies, wearing coral, wielding a trident. The Senate, terrified, hailed his victory. Veterans wept in shame. The bond between emperor and army cracked. By his fourth year, Rome had had enough. The palace fell silent. The Senate paralyzed. The legions humiliated. Whispers turned into conspiracy. Cassius Chaerea, a praetorian officer mocked and humiliated by Caligula, began plotting. Senators who had lost sons, officers stripped of dignity, nobles ruined by seizures, all joined him. There was no grand ideology, only survival. They studied his routines and chose their moment: a narrow corridor during a midday festival, dark and unwatched. As Caligula strolled, mocking an actor, the conspirators struck. "Do you remember me now, Caesar?" Chaerea hissed. A blade tore his neck. Another pierced his chest. "I am still alive." Caligula gasped through blood. But more blades followed, each stroke an act of vengeance. The god emperor fell in a pool of his own blood. Silence followed. Eerily holy. Chaos erupted outside. Bodyguards raged. Senators scrambled. Citizens whispered in shock. The Senate debated restoring the Republic, but the Praetorian Guard had already crowned Claudius, Caligula's timid uncle, hiding behind a curtain. Rome had slain one monster, but the system remained. Caligula's name was erased from records. His decrees voided. His statues toppled. Yet his shadow lingered. For nearly 4 years, the world's greatest empire had bowed to a madman who believed himself divine, and they had done nothing. That silence was his greatest triumph. and Rome's deepest shame. Later writers whispered of his incest, his cruelty, his mock wars, his divine pretenses. But their stories carried a warning: power without check does not merely corrupt, it breeds madness. And when madness wears a crown, it is not easily removed. Rome survived Caligula, but never forgot. His reign scarred the empire's soul. Every emperor after him carried his ghost, some in fear of becoming him, others envying his unrestrained freedom. And the people remembered most, not the feasts, nor even the blood, but the silence. The moments they looked away. The nights they refused to speak. Because a tyrant like Caligula is never born alone. He is allowed. And unless that is remembered, he can rise again.